Welcome to Dude Rakes, hosted by Marty Coleman. Each week, we'll do a deep dive into Clemson baseball with special guests knowledgeable about Clemson and/or college baseball. It's a casual, laid-back, but fast-paced 15 to 20-minute show. With that, let's get started. It's a casual...
Hey, it's Marty Coleman, Southern News Reserve. I apologize for the slow beginning. I'm getting back into StreamYard after a couple of years. I want to welcome everybody in to Dude Rakes, which I'm calling the baseball show. Had this going one time before as a podcast type thing. No podcast on this show. It's going to be a live show. You can also watch it on replay on X, Facebook, or YouTube. We encourage you to watch it multiple times. This show is going to be about the guest we have each week, and I could think of no better guest to have on the first show than my friend Jason Priester from the Clemson Insider. And Jason, what a day! You know, I was kind of trying to take a nap this afternoon, and I thought about this great joke to intro the show with, you know, about you, me. Friday will be a week since last year when we were in Arlington. I walked the 500 yards from dead center field where I was watching the games from. You came down from the clouds in the press box at Globe Life Field. We met in the bowels of Globe Life Field down third base line, and you're not going to be there this year. I'm going to go back this year, me and the kid. It's kind of become a tradition in the family, believe it or not. So I was happy Clemson's playing there next year. I think the kid was happier Clemson's playing there next year, even though he's not a Clemson kid. He's going to be a Texas State kid. But I'll get to see you again next year in person at a Clemson baseball game if everything works out.
Yeah, I had kind of, heard some rumblings that they were going to play there again. I didn't know it was going to be next year or the year after. But that was a fun experience, man. It was a cool weekend. And I kind of look forward to doing it again. It's an interesting venue, right?
Yes.
It's you look at it from the outside, man, and then you're not expecting what it is on the inside. It's just a humongous place, and you hit the nail on the head, man. The press box is way up in the clouds there. You're way up on top of everything, but it's a cool place to watch a ball game, man. And we saw some pretty good baseball there last year.
It's one of my son and I's favorite parks. We've been to a few major league parks and a lot of minor league parks, and it's one of our favorite parks. And you can't tell when it's the college and half of it's closed, right? The college tournament, there's nothing going on in the outfield or whatever. And in the part there, the food is not open in the outfield where I was. Way down where we met, there's Whataburger open, which is what I got for the kid. But when it's fully open, it's a major league game. Really good food there for my experience in the major leagues. Really, really, really good food. Pizza is good, not the crappy pizza you get sometimes at a ballpark, but really good pizza.
And still the only time I've ever eaten Whataburger, and I hope it's better when they're having the rain when the Rangers are playing.
Well, my son said it was good, but he was hungry because there was nothing else there. I don't particularly like Whataburger. I know I'm a Texan, and it's supposed to be a given, but it's not our favorite at all. No one in this family favorite is Whataburger. Hey, let's talk some baseball. We talked a good bit of food and Globe Life Field, and I'll be looking forward to seeing you next year. Clemson is taking on Army on Friday, opening the season, Army West Point, 3-game series scheduled for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. First thing is that's what's going to happen. Are they going to play those days? Do you know? Because I saw South Carolina's already changed their schedule for the weekend.
Yeah, it looks like there might be some weather coming in here on Sunday. Clemson usually, they don't tend to make those kind of decisions on a Monday or a Tuesday. They can't. They tend to, hold off as long as possible. It wouldn't shock me. Just looking at the forecast right now, but seeing as we're still the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 3 days out, you could still have some change in that forecast. But if it stays what it's showing, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me to see them play 2 on Saturday. I'm kind of already kind of preparing for that. And I might, if they do play 2 on Saturday, it might be pretty cool because I think I might be one of the only people on the beat that aren't going to Durham for the basketball game. So I might have most of the press box to myself for a doubleheader. I'm never going to gripe about that.
Never, never, never. Yeah, that's one thing I was thinking about when I talking about Arlington again is that Arlington's inside. It was cold last year, remember? And I thought I'm gonna be inside. JP is gonna have to be in that weather for a little while at least. So one of the benefits again of playing in Arlington. So let's get into what's going to happen on Friday. You know, last year or every year before this year, I always ask you about the rotation. And as I told you via text the other day, I did a little homework this year, and I realized Bakich is really not going to tell us, right? He kind of holds that close to the vest till he lets the team know, and then it kind of comes out a day or two maybe before. But we know Aiden Canuck is your Friday starter. We now know after today that Drew Titsworth is injured and won't be pitching this weekend. We know he mentioned Talon Bell as a starter also this weekend. So we got a third starter that we don't know who it is, or do we know who it is?
I think we know who it is. He pretty much told us today. He said he hinted at it as strongly as he could without saying it was going to be him. Michael Sharman, the Tennessee transfer. Got to watch him some in the fall. The first time I saw him, he got lit up like the 4th of July. He had a very, very rough day. But I was told by someone up there that was the first time he had gotten touched up all fall, that he had been really good. Second time I saw him, he had a really, really good, solid out 2 innings. But, yeah, I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see Canuck on Friday, Sharman on Saturday, and Talon Bell on Sunday. If Titsworth is not hurt, I feel very confident that he would have been the Saturday guy.
Okay. And as I understand it, Titsworth is just it's not a big deal. He'll be back next weekend. Is that correct?
Assuming he doesn't suffer some kind of setback. He said it was something, a strain or something in his armpit.
Right.
But they expected him back by week 2. Not sure. Well, we can get into that later, but yeah, I would have fully expected Titsworth back by week 2, barring something unforeseen.
And I was going to bring up Jacob McGovern later, and we talk about the bullpen, but he's also injured, and it sounds like that's a longer-term thing for
that's what I was fixing to jump on to, and then it hit me that we haven't even mentioned him yet, so I was going to wait. But, yeah, I don't know what to make of that one yet. It sounded like Bakich didn't really know that he was that was still yet to be determined. He said he hoped it wouldn't be long term. If it is, that sucks for him, man, because he dealt with some stuff last year that kept him out for a little while. And he really didn't start to find his groove till really there on the tail end of the season. And that's a guy that's going to be a key piece for you if he's healthy. He might not be a starter. He might not be a closer, but he's a guy that's going to eat innings for you, and he's going to be productive. He's a guy that can give you 1, 2, 3 innings out of the bullpen when you need them. That if he's out for a extended period of time, that's a big loss.
Yeah, that's something you and I were texting about last week, I believe, when we were talking about his role. He can do either, right? He can start. He can give you 3 innings out of the bullpen. And one of the questions I had, I've seen people float him as a closer for this team. What do you think about that notion?
Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't. It's just talking to some people around the program and even listening to Bakich today. I don't know that I see him filling that role. It kind of sounds like maybe Simerson or Joe Allen maybe will get a look there. But as we all know, man, these roles get changed and defined as the season kind of progresses. It might start out one way and end up a totally different way. I do feel like, we've heard Backett say a couple of times he feels like this is the deepest pitching staff he's had since he's been here. We'll see if it plays out that way, but on paper, it kind of looks that way. I didn't really feel that it was going into the fall. I thought, just looking at the roster and seeing how many freshmen there were and how many returners were coming back and stuff, I just didn't have a real good feeling about the pitching staff. And then I see them in the fall. And man, I just came out of fall ball so encouraged by what I saw, particularly with some of the freshmen. I feel like the pitching's probably, if you can keep everybody healthy now, that's key because it's not like they have elite depth. But if you can keep the guys, particularly at the top of the staff, healthy, I think they have a chance to probably be pretty good from a pitching standpoint.
Well, they're already down 2, as we just talked about. And, that was my question. Is that depth real? Because it feels to me, and I don't have any proof, I don't have this on in writing anyway, but it feels to me that we've heard this before, whether it's from the previous staff or even this staff. We're going to see all these arms, and we see them, and you hit ACC, and we don't see him anymore, right? We see him maybe in an inning here in a weekday and an inning there in a weekday game. They just seem to disappear as the season goes on. So, but what I'm hearing from you, you're optimistic that 18 to 20 pitcher depth, if healthy, is potential. That sounds like a whole lot to me, like I wrote about.
I don't know about 18 to 20. That's starting to kind of push the boundary there. But I will say that I came out of the fall feeling pretty good about the pitchers. But, you're already down 3, actually, if you want to count Ariston Vesey, who's going to serve a suspension. Backus didn't make it sound like he was going to be out that long, but I would at least expect him to be out through the first weekend after, getting arrested last month or whenever that was. But, you brought in a guy like Sharman. You brought in VC, the 2 transfers, and then you brought in Simerson, who's a D2 guy who I watched a couple of times in the fall and can't say I was all that enamored with him just because, he got roughed up a couple of times. He was a little up and down, but by all accounts, he had a pretty solid fall, so we'll see. But after watching some of those freshmen throw, man, I'm telling you, you're right. We hear it every year, man. This pitching staff's deep. We got this guy and this guy. We see them a little bit in the non-conference, and then they kind of get roughed up, and we don't see them anymore. I feel like they've got some young guys on this staff that will be able to take advantage of the early opportunities. That's just, a guy like Danny Nelson, Eston Simpson, two true freshmen who man, those are 2 guys, particularly Nelson, who really stood out to me during the fall. Big, hard-throwing guys. I mean, there was a tweet from somebody a few weeks ago about, what did he say, 11 guys throwing –
right,
95 or more.
Yeah.
I don't know that I saw 11, but man, I saw a lot that were touching 95, some 96, 97. VC was hitting 97. I'm telling you, the word I keep using was encouraged. I was just so encouraged. And those 2 freshmen were 2 of those guys that were throwing that hard.
Well,
it's one thing to have velo, man, but you got to be able to locate it and you got to be able to mix some other stuff in. Otherwise, the velo does you no good. You can't just go up there and throw it by everybody every time. But
yeah, it's going to leave faster than it came in. And but I think that's important from my perspective. The velo and the ability to strike guys out, to get out of jams, to overcome the errors that happen so often in the college game. It's really important to be able to get a strikeout here and there when needed. And maybe you already answered this question, but John Grant wants to know who's expected to be the top newcomer, transfer, or freshman. That may lead into the batting lineup, which we're going to talk about in a minute, but who is it in your opinion?
Somebody asked me this same exact question last night. I don't remember who it was, and after I answered it, I did another one of these things. Me and Ashby Mixon last night, and after I answered it, she went in a different direction. And when I see a question like that, my mind goes to freshman. But he said newcomer, right? So that could be a transfer. Or,
yep.
So if we're going with just a newcomer, give me Savoy. And Ty Daly a close second, because this team just didn't have much pop last year, far less than any of us expected going into the season. I think they hit 73 home runs last year, in the 70s, after hitting like 104, 105 the season before. That's a substantial drop, and again, far less than what I think any of us were expecting probably. That's why you go out and add these two guys, man. These are two big bats. I'm kind of interested to see. We know Daly's going to be in right field. I'm kind of interested to see the plan with Savoy. As I saw him in left some. I saw him at catcher some. I think he can even play a little first base. You can always plug him in at DH. But to me, I think it's going to be Savoy. He's going to be a staple in the middle of that lineup, and he can change a game with one swing of the bat.
If I remember correctly, he had 20 home runs at Loyola Marymount as a freshman, and Daly's got 60-something in 3 years at Mercer.
He is the active home runs leader in D1. I think he's got 58, maybe, something like that.
Somewhere in there. I think 21 and 18. Yeah, right around there. All right, well, that leads us right into it perfectly. Bakich talked about he had 12 bats he was comfortable with using this season. See, I did pay attention to those videos that you do with him, JP. But now we're down to 11 with Colin Priest's injury. Sounds like that's going to be a long-term thing. And as an Astros fan, I know how those injuries can linger. And unfortunately, if it lingers for a couple of months, the college season goes by pretty darn quick.
Yeah, and if you're talking about 12 bats that you feel comfortable with, and I hate saying this because it's going to sound like a knock on the kid, but it's really not. But I've got Colin Priest probably at number 12 on that list. There's going to be some odd men out on a day-to-day basis that you're just not going to be able to slide in there. You only got 9 spots. And I feel like, with Gaffney having the fall that he had and, making the improvements that he made throughout the fall. He looked really good when I saw him in the fall. I just kind of, feel like he's probably going to get the majority of the time at first baseman. He's the better first baseman defensively. And you got more options at DH. And I feel like Crichton could end up being another odd man out with Savoy in left field. That's where I saw a lot of Crichton in the fall, was in left. Saw him a little bit in center. But, yeah, when you start talking about guys like Jack Crichton and Colin Priest as 11 and 12, you got to feel pretty good about the other 9 or 10 guys. One of them is going to be Jason Foltz, a freshman who is another big bat. Probably fortunate he didn't go the MLB route coming out of high school. We'll see how long McClatty can hold him off over there at third base. I'm not sure it'll be that long. Bakich kind of confirmed today that McClatty will start at third, but he's also said that he's got to have Foltz's bat in the lineup. So if Foltz is going to be in the lineup, Savoy's got to be in the lineup. That kind of leaves guys like Crichton and Priest on the outside looking in. But I do feel like you're going to have more pop. We'll see if they have the kind of discipline they had last year. They had 50-something more walks in 2025 as opposed to 2024. So that's to me, that's evidence of some better plate discipline. And we'll see what kind of speed they have. We know Purify can move. We know McClatty can move. We'll see if a guy like Lichtenberger is a threat on the base paths. I don't know exactly how much speed's going to be in this lineup, but I do feel like it's going to be better top to bottom. It'll be hard to be worse than it was last year. I mean, let's be honest. They were so inconsistent last year at the plate. If they didn't draw so many more walks than they did in 24, man, they probably got a lot more losses than they ended up having. But yeah, at the end of the day, I feel pretty good about the lineup. You got Gerald back at catcher. Again, you got McClatty and Fultz kind of over there at third, Lichtenberger at shortstop, Purify, what he is at second. They're expecting a big turnaround season or a bounce back season from Gaffney, who really struggled in the second half last year. He's over at first. And then the transfer from Georgia, Bryce Clavon in center. And we've talked about Daly and Savoy, your two counter or corner outfielders. And then add Crichton to the mix. Hopefully Priest is out as long as they think he's going to be out. That's if you can stay on the right side of luck and keep most of those guys healthy, this team might can score some runs.
Yeah, their runs have gone down each year under Backage, by the way. Something I've been working on in the background for a next article. Not a lot, but they've gone down, and that's concerning. And they've gone – I'm sorry, they didn't go down. They went up a little bit in 24, went down last year. The runs given up have gone up every year, which is kind of interesting. But back to McClatty and the McClatty-Fultz battle. It seems like McClatty, I like him. And I don't know what it is. He doesn't look like all that when you see him, but he produces, right? I mean, he had 5 home runs in 90-something at bats last year. He hit the ball hard and well. He can play anywhere on the field, right? Third, first. He played some second, I think, when Purify was out. He can play right field. We know that. He's all over the place. So that is a good guy to have on the college baseball team. Hey, Casey had a question here about anyone. Did they add anyone with the listy type passion? I don't know if that person exists, by the way.
I don't either.
86, then sprinting to first.
That's kind of like asking, is there another Canarella to put out there in center field? There might be only one Dom Listy. That's a good question. I don't know that we'll have the answer to that until we get into the season and learn more about some of these guys. I'll just say this. I think Ty Daly is going to be one of those guys that kind of becomes like a fan favorite, like Dom Listy did last year. Maybe not for the same reasons, but just because of his personality, and he's so likable. He's one of those country boys, man. He talks with that twang in his accent. So I think he'll probably be one of those fan favorites. But as far as a guy that just gets hit, however sets a record for hit by pitches in a season and gets up every time he gets hit and, runs a 4.2 to first base. I don't know. We'll just have to see. I don't know that I saw that from anybody when I was there in the fall. I can't say that I was really looking for it though. I didn't see a lot of guys getting hit by pitches, but it goes. I don't. He's another guy that I was kind of like I was talking about a minute ago that last year that once he got on base, he could, if you needed him to, he could steal some bases for you. He stole 13 last year. Some of these guys, I don't know what they're going to give you from a speed standpoint. But, man, hopefully a guy like Bryce Clavon can evolve into one of those guys that's kind of like an on-base machine, just finds ways to get on base. Or maybe a Lichtenberger. I'm not sure exactly, what he's going to bring to the table from a hitting standpoint. He's solid. He doesn't have a lot of pop, but, man, he's a really good defender over there at short. He's got a lot of range, but maybe he can develop into one of those guys that's consistently on base. Or maybe Gaffney kind of recovers from that sophomore slump he had last year, and he kind of evolves into that type of guy. I've heard everything I've heard about him points to a rebound season. We'll see what happens. But, man, Listy's going to be a hard guy to replace, that's for sure.
507 on base percentage. He got on base over half the time. Walks,
that's
5 pitches, and
it's hard to do.
Yeah, kind of crazy. Hey, one thing you didn't mention about Jason Fultz, I noticed that back his head, he's got I don't remember what was the term he used for it. He fires his bat with exit velos in the 106 to 108. And he said, not just in practice. So in the games they're having, Fultz is making an impression on the head guy.
Yeah, he's talked about him, a few times publicly that I've seen. He did it, which well, to be fair, I kind of asked about him specifically when I was talking to him last week, but he brought him up today, without it. I don't know if he was asked specifically about Fultz today. He might have been asked about McClatty, but that's a guy coming out of high school that had a perfect score of a 10 at perfect game. We know those aren't easy to get anymore, but I kind of see him in the same light as maybe not quite as much pop as a Savoy or Dally, but man, he's got a big stick. He's a big kid. I wish wait a minute. I think I might have that right here. He's a grown boy for a freshman. He's 215 pounds, and he is all muscle, man. He is all muscle.
That's pretty solid for a true freshman.
6 foot 215. Yeah, he looks like one of those guys that live in the gym.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the ACC for a little bit. From what I've seen on Twitter, and that's all I've seen, ACC is deep and talented this year. Teams are going to give the Tigers all they can handle. North Carolina, Virginia's supposed to have a good squad. Who else am I missing how the ACC is supposed to roll along? And Beef, if you're still out there, chime in on it. I know you've done some research.
Yeah, Georgia Tech. I think they might be one of the better teams in the league this year. We know North Carolina is going to be good. We know Virginia is going to be good. We'll see. Florida State's usually pretty good. Louisville's usually pretty good. I think Florida State's ranked in the top 15 in at least one or two of the polls. Virginia's ranked. Louisville's ranked. Clemson's ranked. So it's going to be a deep league. And Miami's in a top 25 or two themselves. And if you start looking at the schedule, Clemson does not avoid most of those teams. They go up to Notre Dame, which that's not one of those teams, but they go up there in March. It'll be cold. And they come back home and get Miami. That might be a top 25 matchup when it rolls around. They got to host North Carolina. They got to go to Virginia, go to Louisville. They get Florida State at home. So 4 of those ranked teams, Clemson's got to do battle with this year. So it is not the easiest of slates, and I think the ACC is going to be – it might even be a little bit deeper than it was last year when all things are said and done. You know what you're going to get with the ACC each and every year. Casey's mentioning Virginia Tech. Guess what? Clemson plays them too, and they're always a tough out. Whether they're ranked or not, that's a team that routinely does not beat themselves and is going to give you a good little fight no matter what kind of season they're at. Now, I can't never remember how to pronounce his name, but, man, their head coach is one of my favorites. It's kind of spelled weird, SCEZ or something like that.
Casey would know, but I can't remember. I can't remember myself. It took me a while to figure out. Virginia is just Duke from last year, but better, Casey says. I just noticed on the schedule they also make a trip out to Stanford.
Yeah.
The basketball team did, which I don't know how good Stanford is now, but when I first got to Texas, they were scary good. They were winning national championships.
Stanford is a well-respected baseball program. I don't know what they'll have this year. I'm not familiar with what they've done recently, but yeah, they're also going to they're going to swing by and play Santa Clara on that Monday too when they head out west. So they'll play a midweek game on a Monday that week.
Interesting. No break. Usually have that day or so in there where the bullpen can get a day down. But Case said you pronounce his name Chef.
There it is. I can never remember.
Yeah, it does. The spelling makes it look a lot tougher than it actually is.
But I like, man. Ever since the first time I, got to be around him a little bit at the ACC tournament a few years ago, I've liked him ever since. He's a good baseball coach.
All right, the Tigers take on Army Friday at 4, Saturday at 2, and Sunday at noon. At least that's what's scheduled. to be determined, I guess. And they always seems like early in the season, even though they're in the South, they're always changing those games up at the last minute a lot of times. Also, JP, I always ask you every year about the College World Series, but I am going to skip it this year, just like Eric Bakich and his team. I don't even have it on the back of my hat. I'm going to skip that and just kind of give what do you think the upside is for this team and the floor and the ceiling for this team? I'm trying not to get my hopes up, as I seem to do every year. And maybe that's why I'm not asking about it specifically about that city in Nebraska in the middle of the country in the middle of June. But floor and ceiling for this Clemson team in your estimation.
Yeah, I do like the approach they're taking. Let's don't talk about it. Let's be about it. And not that I've had a problem with it or anything, but Bakich has talked a lot about Omaha since he's been back at Clemson the last 3 years, and it's just not happened for him yet. So I kind of like the new attitude about, let's just do it and not talk about it. But, going back to last summer after last season was over, after they made the moves they made in the portal, I didn't have a good feeling about this team. I wasn't expecting a whole lot. And then, like I said earlier, I went to a bunch of scrimmages in the fall, more than a half a dozen. And, I just came away so encouraged by what I saw. But I do still think there are some unknowns. Can some of those young pitchers that were so good in the fall, can they, make that translate to real games when the lights are on and the pressure's turned up? I think it's fair to ask that question. And can they, be better offensively than they were last year, at least more consistent? This was a team that experienced some highs and lows last year offensively. They just weren't very consistent. Going to have to be, better at the plate. But I got asked the same thing last night, and I struggled with it last night, and I've thought more about it today. But I don't see any reason why this team shouldn't be hosting a regional, come postseason time. I don't care that the schedule's tougher than it was last year or the year before last. Yeah, the schedule's tough, but, the good teams, the cream of the crop is going to rise to the top. They're going to beat the teams that are in front of them. And if let's face it, if you want to get back to Omaha, that's the teams you're going to have to beat to get there. Anything after that, I just don't know, man, because I just think there are still some unknowns about this team. I see some of the projections coming out, having Clemson going on the road for the postseason. I just don't know about that. I feel pretty good about them hosting, despite the tough schedule. But anything after that, we'll see. Maybe they're another year away before they're really, really ready to make that kind of run. But if they got hot at the right time and made a deep postseason run, it wouldn't shock me, man, because I'm telling you, I just loved what I saw in the fall from the pitchers. Whether they're get there this year or the next year, particularly the young guys, we'll see. Sometimes it takes a guy a year before he's really ready to roll. But I do think they have the right foundation in place, and I still believe he'll get them back, and probably sooner rather than later. I just don't know that it'll come this year. We'll see. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities, but as we sit here right now, I'll go as far as saying I think they'll host a regional, and anything after that is gravy.
That's fair. I think that's kind of Bakich's mantra, right? Is that you need to be hot at the right time. And as much as I don't want to hear that, as much as I'm the just do it guy in year 4, I certainly understand it. I've watched enough baseball to know that. I mean, the Atlanta, who was it that beat the Washington Nationals can beat the 109 win Houston Astros in the World Series. It's got right at they got hot at the right time. The Braves did the same thing in 21, right? They just tore through them.
Yep.
So as much as people don't want to hear that, myself included,
there is a lot of merit to it.
Yeah, Just got to get hot at the right time. I was going to ask you what you saw the shortcomings in. Obviously, just explain it. I think that's true too. I have written several times already that I'm going to believe the pitching depth when I see the pitching depth, not when I hear it in the preseason. No offense to Coach Back, he would know much better than I would, but he's also selling a product, right?
And I think he's oversold it a little bit in the past too. So I mean, I think it's fair to say you want to see it before I believe it.
Yeah, and I think they obviously were sorely missing power last year, but they were missing arms that could get outs in those games you talked about, in the regional, in the big games, not in the fall scrimmages or the spring.
You get to the ACC tournament last year and then into the regional last year. It wasn't the offense that really cost them. It was not having the pitching.
Yeah.
They just ran out of arms.
Yeah.
Some of that, you can chalk up to injuries, but some of that you can chalk up to they just didn't have enough quality depth. So I think it's fair to say, I'm not going to believe it till I want to see it before I believe it. That's why I just keep using the term encouraged. I was encouraged by what I saw in the fall. I saw a lot more than I was expecting to see. And, I think there might be some young guys that I didn't originally think were going to be ready to help. Maybe they are. Again, I go back to those two I named earlier with Danny Nelson and Eston Simpson. I think and maybe even Peyton Miller. He looked good in the fall. Dan Margulies looked good in the fall, but he's another guy that Backett said today's hurt. So that's a fourth pitcher they're without. And it sounded like he might be out a little bit, so we'll see. But encouraged. That's what I'm going with. I was encouraged. But I got to see it before I jump in head first.
All right. That's fair. That's fair. And if there's anybody I want to be encouraged about Clemson baseball, is Jason Priester. JP works at the ClemsonInsider.com. You can find him on X at JP_Priester. JP, thanks so much for your time. And as we talked about before the show, we want to have you on sometime down the line. Value your time. I know you're busy. You were on with Ashby last night. No telling who else you're going to be on with tomorrow or maybe even later tonight. No. So appreciate your time, and we'd like to have you back. Maybe we can get Beef on here, and the three of us can have a powwow some point.
Oh, yeah. That's what I'm looking forward to. Me, you, Beef. That's my press box buddy right there.
There you go. Jason.
Anytime, man. Always a pleasure.
Jason Priester, the ClemsonInsider.com. Thanks, JP.
Yes, sir. My pleasure.